Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm just checking my phone so I can make sure I say hi to everybody. So as you log on, as you come into the room, make sure that you say hello and let me know where you are. Before I start to introduce my special guest, I want to make sure that everybody is checked in, and I know where you're watching from. So there you guys are. Very good. Thank you so much. Oh, hey, Derek from Chicago. Nice to see you. I think my mom just logged in, which is always good.
Oh, that's nice.
Well, yes, trust me, she would not miss it if there's any way possible. So, hey, guys, thank you so much. All right, well, let us get started. We were really a little bit late, but that's okay. We had some things that we had to work out, as always, with some, when technology's involved. But today is a really important discussion because I think that, especially as we are entering the second half, well, we are really in the second half of 2019. We're in the third and fourth quarter. Professional challenges, personal challenges, just life sometimes will have you stuck. And I know I was kind of going through this myself about a month ago where I just was so overwhelmed and just had such a lack of clarity that I just could not make a move. I could not make a decision. And I know it is like the worst feeling. And so I had to call in the experts to kind of help us with, ways that we can get unstuck if we're confused, if things are not going our way, whatever it may be. So today we're going to have a conversation with Dr. Tatum Session C is an international speaker, leadership and career coach. She's also a consultant, and she is going to help us with some tools on how to overcome challenges in any situation. So welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yay.
Yay. So let me just say with Tana, so Tana has both of them. So she has the personal history with challenges, but she also has the education and the tools and the skills that we need to help us overcome the challenges. So I kind of want to start with the personal part first because Tana just recently became a doctor. She has her PhD, and she came from maybe a start that you would not associate with that. So let us talk about that.
Sure.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. So glad to be here, Nikki. Thanks. I'm very honored.
No, I'm honored to have you on. So let's talk about your growing up. What was that like for you?
That's a really good way to start because even when I do speaking engagements, sometimes I'll ask people to tell me what their first impression was of me, right? Tell me what they think my family makeup was like, my childhood, and never do they get it right. But that's good because that means that the work I put into who you see today, that it worked. So I'm from the foster care. I was born into the foster care system of New York. I was there for almost 4 years with a foster family who actually got me from the hospital from birth and kept me until I was almost 4 years old. And from there, fortunately, my grandfather remarried and had some younger children and wanted to move them out of the city and down south. So with that, he was able to get guardianship of me from the system and raised me until I was about 9, 10 years old when my mother actually moved to South Carolina as well. And I was able to go live with her. So I tell everyone, very humble roots, very humble beginnings. Didn't really meet my father until I was about 11. And, that was a story in itself. To understand who he was and why he wasn't available to me as a parent growing up. But, they were teenagers. My mom was 17 when she got pregnant with me. My father was the same age. My mom had already had a child at 15 and then had another one at 19 and really wasn't prepared to be a parent.
Yeah, it's after I had kids, it's like I was so like, how can a 17-year-old, 16-year-old, 23-year-old sometimes even manage this whole process? But so how much, because I know we all have memories. How do you have any memories from that 0 to 4, from birth to 4 years old that you can share?
I do actually. And it surprised my grandfather actually, because one day I remember I was probably about 5 years old and I asked him, we were watching TV. And do you remember the Hanes pantyhose commercials back? And you might be too young, Nikki, but
like pantyhose.
They used to have a Hanes pantyhose commercial that would come on. And I remember turning to my grandfather and I said, "Who is Mrs. Hanes?" And the look on his face was really, when I think back on it, was shock. But Mrs. Hanes was the name of the woman who was my foster mother. And I think he probably hoped I didn't remember, right? Because I was so young. And then in addition to remember her name, I also remembered being molested by my foster brother. And, you know, when I shared that with him, and I say it in those words now, but back then I didn't have the words for it, but I explained to him what happened. And he said, you know, don't worry about it. You'll never see those people again. You're safe. So those are two of the main memories that I have. Is I remember Mrs. Haines. I remember being a very warm, loving woman. I also noticed she was white. It was a white family that had me, which is interesting. Yes, I kind of noticed. I know this is a little difference, you know.
That's funny.
And I did have some identity crisis growing up, you know, until my grandparents checked me and let me know, no, you are a Black girl. So.
God, it was so funny. I was in the airport the other day, and trust me, I am so appreciative of anybody who wants to adopt children or foster children, no matter what the race is. Mm-hmm. But there was this little girl, this little Black girl who, you know, was clearly with a loving family that was not Black. And I just wanted to take a comb out and be like,
"Oh no,
let me show you.
Let me help you."
It was so, but like I said, I'm just so appreciative of anybody that loves children, because they need all the love that they can get.
Yes, definitely.
So let's fast forward. So you were living with your mother, you were in South Carolina, but eventually you left and you were doing your own thing. So tell me kind of about those younger years and what that was like for you.
Sure. So, you know, I decided when I was 16, going on 17, that I was no longer going to live with my mother. We had a very tumultuous relationship, verbally, physically abusive. And I saw my father as a relief to that, because, you know, he was the Disney dad. I would go to New York for the holidays, for the summers, and everything was always great. And so I said, I'm going to go live with my father. And so I basically just left and went to go live with him. And what I realized is that he still, even at that age, wasn't prepared to be a father. Fortunately, he was married. So I had a really good stepmother that just really embraced me as her own daughter. And she had a daughter as well that he had adopted. And so I stayed with them until I graduated high school. And then I did the crazy thing of getting married right after high school. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was in love and no one could stop me.
So you weren't thinking, essentially, right?
I wasn't thinking.
The whole love thing just puts everything out the window.
It sure does. But, you know, when I look back on it, Nikki, I know really what I was looking for was a place to call home, a safe haven, somewhere that, you know, I can really call my own. Right. Because I think I'd always felt, even growing up with my grandparents, that it really wasn't mine, because those were my grandparents, not my parents. Right. And so I did that, and the marriage lasted a good 18 months solid. And then probably another 6 months where it wasn't so solid. And then we ended up getting separated and ultimately divorced. And it, you know, it was a bad divorce, because as a result of that divorce, I ended up being homeless. He had stopped paying the rent, and I didn't know. By this time, my mom was sick, fighting cancer in South Carolina. So I'd gone to go spend time with her. And while I was out of town doing that, he moved out of the apartment and took everything with him, and just left my clothes behind. So I came back and I found out that, you know, he hadn't paid rent for 2 months because he was responsible for rent. I took care of all the other bills plus groceries, and not knowing that he hadn't been paying the rent. And as a result, I was homeless. So I had to find somewhere to live pretty quickly, that would take me in with all my stuff, my clothes, etc. And I still had to, you know, be in the right mindset to go to work every day and keep my job. And luckily I had an aunt that I really wasn't that close to, didn't really know her, but she was the only person in the family that someone said, she has space, you can go live with her. And I ended up moving to Queens and live with my aunt, Georgette.
So you were working and you were dealing with all of this. What are some of the things, because I can't even imagine like being homeless and having to go to work, and I'm sure you probably, well, I don't know. Did you share your situation with people at work or
no.
Your circle? Yeah, I figured you didn't. Mm-hmm. So how could you get yourself in that mindset so that you could go to work and you know, be okay, you know, not be in tears like the entire time?
Right. It was hard, you know, and I made mistakes that under normal circumstances, I know I probably wouldn't have made, but it was because my head wasn't in the game. And ultimately it got to a point where I decided that probably wasn't a good job for me, because I felt like I wasn't being successful. And I wasn't really showing up as my best self. And no, I didn't tell anyone there. I was the executive assistant to the CEO. He was this multimillionaire, very eccentric gentleman, I'll say. And, he has zero tolerance for mistakes. He has zero tolerance for bringing your personal life into the workplace. Right. So I really had to, come with my A game every day, and it got to be too much. And I went and I looked for another job, and I was able to find another one where it was less stressful. Luckily, again, I was staying with my aunt. I knew I couldn't stay there long because I was, sleeping on a day bed, and I had all my stuff kind of piled up in a corner. So it wasn't comfortable. And I started looking for a roommate for the first time. I never lived with anyone before outside of family. And I said, I know I need my own space. I'm an adult, I'm a grown woman. And so I was able to find a roommate in Brooklyn. So I was able to move back to Brooklyn, and I got a job working in the same building, funny enough, but working for Children's Television Workshop, where I get to answer fan letters for Cookie Monster and Big Bird.
I didn't know that. That is so cool.
I had a good time. I was also the bodyguard for the Cookie Monster costume.
Oh my gosh. I bet you had to fight those little kids.
I did.
But you know what's interesting? I was thinking about this the other day because, obviously everybody goes through challenges or whatever. And I was thinking about the difference between going through a challenge when I was at a job and going through challenges when I'm not at a job. And I think it was so much easier to pull out of it when I was at a job, because you have to go and you have to face people and you have to be social and you kind of have to push things away. And so you don't wallow in it, I guess, so to speak. It's like there was one period where it's like if I didn't want to get out of bed, I didn't get out of bed. And I think sometimes you have to do that. But I think that if you don't have anywhere to go, you allow yourself to do it for longer than is necessarily healthy. So I think it's interesting, that you were able to push through, but you still have to be in a certain mindset to get it done. Yeah. And so what was kind of your turning point where you were like, okay, I'm happy being Cookie Monster's bodyguard, but I know that there is more for me and I want to pursue it. What was that moment like for you?
Honestly, I felt like even when I was little and I was in living with my grandparents, I've always felt like there's something more for me. I'm supposed to be bigger than where I am right now. And at one point I thought that meant I was going to be a supermodel. So I tried to be a model. That didn't work. I mean, it worked, but I didn't become a supermodel.
I saw those Getty images. Don't even try it. I was like, oh my goodness.
I didn't become a supermodel.
You looked like one. I'll say that.
Thank you. Thank you. But I think the turning point for me was I ultimately got a job at Ernst & Young, and I was what they call a floating secretary. So I basically didn't have a full-time partner that I worked for. I was someone who kind of filled in when someone was out sick or on leave, but I was a full-time employee for E&Y. And I landed in the Department of Personnel. Back then they called it. And there was a director. She had been newly promoted, didn't have an assistant. And she and I just kind of bonded. She liked the fact that I showed up. I was, smart. I always was looking to do more. Right. And she asked if I would be her assistant. And so she was my very first mentor, the very first person that saw more in me than I saw in myself. I saw myself as just being a really good administrative assistant. And she saw me as, you could be so much more. You could be in my job one day.
You saw you as a boss.
Yeah. And I was like, no way, no way. I didn't have a degree, no formal education. And I just didn't see that in myself, but luckily she did. And as a result, it really set me on the path for exactly where I am today.
Which is as a doctor. So you went from having no degree, you get a mentor, and then you decide not just going to college, not going to just be satisfied with my master's. I'm going to go all the way and get a PhD. What was that process like?
Yeah. So I ultimately did go back to college. And I have to share that, I got married a second time. I had my son and then got divorced. And through that divorce, homeless again, to the point where I didn't have a job, right, Nikki? So remember you said it's easier when you have a job. Well, during this time, I didn't, because he and I have been entrepreneurs for almost 9 years. I hadn't been in the workplace for many years. So I didn't have a degree. I had to go back to a job and find one that would take me with this big gap in my resume that I really couldn't quantify in terms of what experience I'm bringing to the table. And I went back to school and got my undergrad at 38 years old because I had this young boy looking at me, and I knew one day I was going to tell him he had to go to college. And he was very precocious, and I could just imagine him telling me, "You don't have a degree and you're okay."
Right.
So I was
Right.
like, let me just be able to take that off the table for him, right? And then I immediately went into a master's program because I said, I didn't want to stop. And I saw, again, that vision that my mental health put in me. I said, now I'm at the point where I'm believing in, I know I can do this. I can be the head of HR for a big corporation, international corporation. And I went and got my master's, and then I got certifications. And then luckily, was able to grow my career to become that top HR executive for different companies. And I held that position for about 4 different companies for a span of about 10, 11 years. And then this year, someone who had been following me, her name is Dr. M. White, had been following me for a couple of years. And she and I were both in this Boss Network together, founded by Kamika Smith. And she approached me just out of the blue. And she said, "I want to nominate you for an honorary doctorate through the school that I got mine from." And I said, "First of all, I thought they only gave that to celebrities. So I'm nobody. How's that possible?" Right? And she said, "No." She said, "There is a process. The only thing I can do is nominate you, but you have to go through interviews. You have to get letters of recommendation. You have to prove community service, et cetera, because it's a seminary school. So they want you to have a sense of service and not just about, notoriety." And so I went through the process. It took about 2-3 months to get through everything. And June 30th, I was able to graduate and walk across the stage and get my honorary PhD. Now I'm
But
doctor.
not just that, not only did you receive your PhD, but you were also this year the commencement speaker for, was it 3 or 4?
Oh gosh, 4
4
commencement
different
speeches. I know.
Yeah, I was feeling pretty shiny with my one until I talked to you.
Well, it was the same school, but they had 4 graduations, which is fantastic.
4 different commencement speeches. So that's awesome.
It's the school I got my master's from, so it was very, very honored to be able to be selected. Even they've never had an alumni do the keynote before in the history of the school. So I'm the first one, and hopefully, I'm setting the example for others to come behind me and do the same thing.
Yeah, no, it was when I did mine at one, because I have 2 different degrees from 2 different schools, and I did one at the one that I got my broadcasting degree from. And it was such a surreal experience. Yes. I mean, there were students that were graduating whose parents I had graduated, had been in school with. I mean, it was just amazing.
Wow.
And just, being there for such a moment.
Yes.
And such a new beginning and a new chapter. I mean, it just was, for me, I was probably more, inspired. My whole family was there like I was graduating. But we had like a whole section. It was crazy. But I was probably more inspired than them, just because I knew like what this beginning was like. And so as you mentor and as you coach and as you consult, what is it that you tell younger people as they open a new chapter? What are some of the things that they should be looking for, some of the things that they should be doing, paying attention to in order to really kind of stay on that track to success?
Well, I would say one of the themes that I said, even in my speech, and it really is something that applies to myself, and I live it and breathe it every day, that it doesn't matter where you start, it's all about where you see yourself going. And I use that phrase time and time again in my speech because I really wanted it to resonate and land with the students, because a lot of times we feel victims of our circumstances. And what I tell people is that it may not be your fault what happened to you or how you grew up or what your parents were like, but it's your problem. And what I mean by that is that you can't wallow in it and get stuck in it. You have to use it as a springboard to say, this has given me strength. This has given me validity. It's given me core skills that I can pull from, because I feel like if you could walk that path, like if I think about my path, if you're able to walk that path and come out on the other side of it, being, Dr. Tana M session with all these accolades and, people wanting you to be on their show and talk about their journey, then it was all worth it, right? So that's one of the things that I talk to people about, is helping them identify how these adversities really you need to turn them on their head and use them as fuel and not excuses to push you to success. So some people, and I have people in my family and friends I know, they're stuck. They're stuck in these, you know, in the past. They can't let things go. They want to blame everyone and not think about, okay, that's fine. I could sit here and blame my parents all day long for having me at 17 and not being parents. Or I could say, you know what, I'm so glad they blessed me to come into this world. And now I can make a difference. And I can make certain that for my children, that I break that curse, that generational curse, and that I'm able to provide a legacy that I'm proud of, you know? So that's one of the key things when I'm working with my clients that we work on, is to dig underneath the hood and really understand, like, what types of adversities, what types of things are showing up in your life, and how are you reacting to them? Because me dealing with, you know, being in foster care, not having someone I can call mom or dad, where my friends did, you know, I had things that I dealt with, you know, feeling that I didn't belong. I had to deal with abandonment issues. I had to deal with feeling unloved, not worthy of it. And that showed up in different ways in my life, in my career, in my relationships, you know, even in my marriages. So absolutely. So if we're not willing to face that, you know, like Jay-Z says, you can't heal what you don't reveal. If you're not willing to face that for yourself, then yeah, you're always going to have these things pop up, and they're going to continue to hold you back.
I was reading this book by, and I don't even know if I say his last name right, but it's Joe Vitale or Joe Vitale. He was in The Secret. And he wrote this book based on, it's like a Hawaiian principle, Hawaiian prayer, where basically it says that you are responsible for everything that happens in your life. And even though I have issues with that, like, I don't know how you were responsible at birth for, you know, but I think that more so what it means to me is that you have to take responsibility for whatever has happened. And as long as you stay in, it's not my fault, I didn't do this. And like you said, blaming your parents or blaming this and blaming that, you never are looking for the solution to further or get out or change or better or do whatever it is you're trying to do. And so, so it really did kind of change my way of thinking. And as opposed to getting mad because a client didn't pay me on time, or getting mad because my kids didn't do their homework or whatever, looking at like how I contributed to that situation. So am I displaying any kind of behavior that says it's not important to do your homework because I didn't finish some job assignment or so but whatever it is, and not just woe is me, I've got horrible children because they don't do their homework, or, you know, this client is a bad person because they didn't, you know, what is it in me that has also contributed to this situation? And when you take responsibility like that, it relieves you of a lot of bitterness. It relieves you of a lot of resentment, because you've got to put some onus on you too. So it just really made such a difference in how I saw bad situations happening to me.
Yeah, definitely. And again, that goes back to my mantra of, it may not, you know, it may not be your fault, but it's your problem, right? So you do have to deal with it. You can't just put it in a closet and hope it fixes itself, or feel like, oh, I'm older now, I should be over it, or even let other people tell you should be over it. Because it's going to manifest and show up in different ways, you know. And I sabotage relationships, I sabotage jobs, you know, because these behaviors would show up, you know, especially if it's abandonment, or if I'm feeling like I'm not being included in something. It's like, oh, well, I'll show you, you know, and that's reacting. That's just reacting.
You know what? It's interesting because I think that's anybody. And it's like the more people I talk to, you know, the more, you know, everybody has these issues. I mean, you can have like an ideal life and something is going to be you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so it's like, I look at, like, you know, my early teens, early 20s, when really like all of my beliefs or all of the perceptions I had, or, you know, whatever it was like a runaway train. Like I couldn't even see it coming. You know what I mean? It's like I just reacted full blown on.
Yep.
And then it would get to a point where I could see it coming, but like I didn't have the tools to change it or to stop it or to deal with it before it hit me.
Yeah.
And it's like, now it's like, okay, I got you. I see you coming now. I know exactly what this is. I know exactly what's about to happen.
Yeah.
So it's not something, I think, and I think people should really hear this. I don't know if it's something that ever goes fully away.
No.
I think it's just, you learn, you know, from people like you, and you get coached, and you go to counseling, you go to therapy, and you get the tools needed in order to handle it.
Yeah.
And handle it before it handles you, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a prime example of that, Nikki. So we were talking about me doing the commencement speech, and the one in Atlanta was 765 students, 4,500 guests. huge.
Yeah, you're showing
And yeah. And so, we're at the Georgia World Congress Center. And in my mind, I'm not thinking how big this room is going to be. So we walk up to the doors are closed, and they're kind of giving me a walkthrough and help me understand like where I'm going to come from and, et cetera. And they opened up the door, and the only thing I said was, whoa. And I was telling my girlfriend, I said, you know how you see the weddings on TV and the doors are closed to the reception, and then the bride and groom see their vision become a reality for the first time. They open up that door and they're like, oh, that's what that moment was like for me, because it was like a sea of chairs. Mm-hmm. And the stage was so far away. And I thought to myself, imposter syndrome hit me like a brick. And I thought to myself, oh my God, what am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm going to screw this up. All these people coming here to hear me speak. I'm not ready. I'm thinking this is like a stage for Oprah or Yana. I'm not supposed to be on this stage. Mm-hmm. I had to quickly address what I call 4-year-old Tana that lives in those areas of insecurity because she didn't belong. I had to address 4-year-old Tana and say, no, girlfriend. First of all, you did the work to get here. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this is not your first ride in the rodeo. And guess what? You said you wanted to be on stages this big, and here's your chance. You asked for it and the universe delivered. Now go do what you do. And I did. But you're right. It never goes away. You have to know how to cope through it. You have to give it a voice. You have to acknowledge it when it happens, because you're not crazy. I wasn't crazy thinking that. But it was my default belief system. And I had to let that go. And when I did, I stood in that power on that stage. And it's like, well, first I couldn't look out and see all those faces because it freaked me out. So I only looked at a few in the front and just focused on those. But at one point it was like standing room only. I was like, whoa, I can't look back there, but it happens. Regardless of, like you said, where you are in life, what type of accolades you have, what you've accomplished, it never goes away. You just have to learn you have to recognize it and know how to cope with it when it shows up, not give into it.
And I think for one of the things that I love that you say how you talk to your 4-year-old Tana, because I did that for so long and I thought I was crazy until I heard like a psychologist say that
it's real.
Reparent.
That's
you
right.
reparent yourself. And
right.
Even though I have absolutely phenomenal parents, I mean, I think that every, relationships are relationships, whether your parents or your sister, or your boyfriend or whatever, and there's always something.
Yeah.
That always. Some, remnants. And so, it leaves you feeling some kind of way, but I would have to do that all the time. And I think even though people see you, like you see you Dr. Tatum Session now, they think that you've gotten to a certain point and that you shouldn't have to ever deal with that. And I'm like, that it just never goes away. It just never goes away. Mm-hmm. I had a girlfriend call me when I was going through one of my challenges, and it was a big transition for me to go from, working in the field that I was working and becoming an entrepreneur. And I really went through an identity crisis, I think. And because I was so closely defined by my job. Mm-hmm. And she's like, you have totally forgotten who you are. Like, just because you don't work there anymore, that your whole history, all of your, everything has just gone away. She's like, you have got to remember who you are. And I was just like, it just, it was such a moment.
Yeah,
for me.
Yeah, I love that.
I really had. And so cool. So I want some more strategies from you.
Okay.
So for those who are feeling stuck, what are some of the things that we can do immediately to kind of shake us up, get us out of there, and start to really kind of see things and then deal with them?
So I was interviewing someone for my book when I was in Atlanta, and she said something in a unique way that I say as well, but I like the way she said it. She said, if your father, and your father can be your heavenly father or your earthly father, said, I have all the money in the world to give you whatever you want in terms of designing a life for yourself. And you have the option to sit across from this person and say, let me write my wish list of what I vision my life to be. What would that be? So I tell people, think about if you had no boundaries around finances, socioeconomic, education, if there was no thing that would stop you, what life would you have for yourself? What would you design for yourself?
Right.
So I do believe in the power of visualization. I believe in the power of writing stuff down, because when you write stuff down, it gets done. And sometimes we as adults, we stop dreaming and we stop believing that dreams can become reality, but they can. So you're proof of it in terms of what you're doing. I'm proof of it. And there's tons of others who are as well, that we just removed those limits off of ourselves and said, okay, let's say that the universe doesn't stop me. What is it that I want to do? What's the thing that I'm so good at? People tell me all the time I'm really good at, and I don't really think about it because it comes naturally. And how can I take that now and make this something that I can make into my real life? Because we get a life script written for us by our parents or by society that says, you know, you go to school, you get good grades, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you have kids. Well, maybe that's not the life that you were supposed to have anyway, right?
No, yeah, sure.
So we fall trapped to that. We fall into that trap. So I think sometimes we have to go back to our younger childhood selves where there were no limitations and we were willing to jump off things and believe that we would not get hurt. Sometimes you got to jump through life and believe you won't get hurt, and think that, I think Steve Harvey said it, the parachute's going to open on the way down. You just got to believe that for yourself and know that.
I think the key is the believing thing, because I mean, I'm trust me, I have like, I just cracked like 100 journals. So I'm a big writer and I believe in scripting and I believe in all of that. But I think that the difference between those that do it and it works and those when it doesn't quite work the way that they want it to work is their beliefs. And whether or not you believe you deserve it, because you can say, I'm a millionaire, I'm got all the money in the world. But if you don't believe it, there's no way that it's going to ever be a part of your reality. And so, and that's why I get so mad at, like, you know, the people that jump on the whole law of attraction and this, and they don't really walk people through. I mean, you can't just write it down and think that it's going to fall from the sky.
That's
I mean, you got to do some of the work, you know,
all of the work,
actually, to change how you believe, because it's just, you know, if you know, I mean, it's a whole thing, but that just gets me so upset because people, you know, they're spending all these time making all these vision boards and they're writing down and this and that, and they're wondering why it doesn't happen. And that's one of the biggest reasons it doesn't, because they somewhere don't feel that they deserve this as a part of their reality.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And you're right. You got to do the work. You know, that's without saying, I hope, but you know, you're right. It's not going to magically appear, and it's not going, you're not, you know, rubbing a bottle and a genie's popping out. You write it down just to give yourself some context and something to kind of look at and touch and feel, so you can start making it part of your reality. But then, you got to do the work too. You got to put yourself in situations and rooms, in meetings, with people that can help it happen. You got to get from behind a computer and go out and meet people face to face or on the phone, you know, all the things that sometimes are outside of your comfort zone. That's what's really going to help you grow and get you into those positions where those things can become a reality. You know, that's something that I look and to do every day. And it's not something I always want to do. Some days I do want to stay in bed. Sometimes I do want to stay in bed.
But you know what's interesting? I was listening to this lecture probably about 6 months ago. And I think that we know it, but it just was explained so brilliantly. And I'm sure I'm not going to do it justice, but they were talking about the difference between just doing things, like just taking action, as opposed to inspired action. And so a lot of us think, and I was this way too, like the more we do, the harder it seems that we're working. That's what's going to translate into people respecting you and success. So this whole notion of, you know, ease and flow in your business and it just feeling great. You just, you know, being, you know, whatever. I had no concept of. Plus I'm Jamaican. So, you know, we're supposed to work hard.
Right.
You know, so I just had no concept of it. And so after I heard that lecture, I mean, one of my, you know, intentional things that I was working on is just that ease and flow, like not being stressed out, like understanding everything is going to be taken care of. And I think once that switched, the opportunities that came, even if I had fought it before, felt better.
Yeah.
You know, because I kind of knew that this was going to lead to something, because I was anyway. So
but it's being intentional. You're right. It's about being intentional, because I mean, you're right. Some people can just be busy just to be busy, but if they're not intentional and if what they're working on is not leading them to that thing that they wrote down or that they have in mind for themselves, then what's the point? There's no point to it. You just wasted a bunch of energy and you're not really making traction.
Yes. Okay. So we have some comments. So we've got about 10 minutes left. And so we're going to take, not comments, but questions. And we're going to get you to respond. So one of the questions that they asked, first of all, have you written a book? And yes, you have quite a few. So tell us about the books that you've written. Yes.
Yeah. So the first book I wrote is called Inside the Revolving Door: Chronicles from the Human Resources Department. And it's a collection of short stories based on different things that employees have done in the workplace. So it's entertaining, needless to say. People told me it's laugh out loud and clutch your pearls at the same time.
I can't even imagine. Like,
oh yes,
HR department. Now.
Oh my God, yeah, it's interesting. So I give people a little peek into what are some of the things we deal with behind closed doors that we can't tell other employees about. And then the second book I wrote is called Get Your Career Life in Order. And that one went to #1. And it is a guidebook that walks you through from the time you decide you want a new job or you want a promotion, what are the steps you need to take to do that successfully? And then it takes you all the way through your first 90 days in this new job. What do you need to be focused on those first 90 days? So I tell people the president has a 100-day plan. We should at least have a 90-day plan. So I've been doing it for years. It's been successful. And I have all my clients do it as well. So the book it has templates and blank pages and stuff to write in. So I tell people it's not something you read and put on a shelf. It really is a guidebook for you to use and write and use again and again. And then my third book is called The Little Book of Motivation, Volume 1. And it's a collection of the quotes that I had the most engagement and interaction with in 2017. And I put them into a journal. And they're categorized by, career-focused quotes to relationship-focused quotes to success-focused quotes, and just asking people to use the blank pages that are in there to write how will they apply these quotes to their life and to their career and their business. And now I'm working on a fourth book, and I'm excited about this one. So I have to have my manuscript done by the end of August. It's the first time I'm going through a real live, like publisher, not Amazon. So I'm not self-publishing like my other books.
It is a different experience.
It's a different experience. Yes. So I actually have a deadline for my manuscript, which is the end of August, to get it to my agent. And then the magic happens after that. Yeah, so hopefully it'll be released next year.
No, it's a different experience, but congratulations on that. Another question somebody had was the difference between being a career professional and then being an entrepreneur. And do you have any advice on how to make the transition?
One of the things I can say is I've always treated my career like I was an entrepreneur. So whether I was the head of a department, the head of a team, I treat it as if it were my own. And so I took those same skills and I moved them into my business. So it wasn't completely foreign to me, with the exception of I didn't have a product, a widget to sell. Mm-hmm. I'm the widget. So selling myself is different. So my ex-husband and I, my son's father, we owned stores and, brick and mortar type businesses for those 9 years. But now I'm the product. It's my intellect. It's my intellectual property. It's, me. So that was a big difference for me in terms of how I showed up, how I positioned and marketed myself, and, and kind of owning that, right? So that's been a change, but it's been a good change because it's also elevated the level of power that I feel about how I show up and what I bring to the table. I can't hide behind a business name or a company logo. It's me.
Yeah. And so for that transition for you, because I think one of the things that I've seen people do and I've heard people do it, is that, they don't like their job. They're ready to, they're starting to get frustrated. They, so they start doing things that may not be beneficial once you leave. And one of the biggest things I say is you never know like who's going to be able to help you. Your boss may be able to introduce you to somebody that's going to help you in your new profession. And so what are some of because you talk about the first 90 days, what do you think those last 90 days, I guess, should be like before you transition out? Is there anything that people should be doing, be aware of, put into place? What are some of your thoughts there?
I think it's good so I'm gonna put on my HR hat because I've seen people do it right and I've seen people do it so wrong.
I know. Hello.
I say finish the same way you started. Keep that same enthusiasm and energy up because you're right. You don't want to burn bridges. You never know when you might be able to turn that that employer into a client down the road. So, or your boss might become your client down the road. So you never want to burn a bridge, even if you feel like they've done you wrong. It's just not a fit anymore. You know, I've had people who went to lunch, never came back, you know, those types of things. But, you know, give your notice, you know, give your proper notice, and then make sure that you're setting the next person up for success. So do knowledge transfer, write things down. If there's certain things that you know you've done that work that aren't documented anywhere, do them a favor and document it, right? Because that kind of stuff goes a long way in terms of, you know, how you build them into, you have to think about this is social capital and you don't want to burn it. Social capital is more expensive to replace and it's more difficult to gain than cash money. So social capital will take you a long way. It will open doors for you that you can't open for yourself. And it will have your name spoken in rooms that you haven't even entered into yet that are setting you up for success. So you got to keep that in mind, even when they piss you off.
Yeah. It's like, and that was, I'm gonna be honest, that was like one of the hardest things for me to do when I left, because it was such a competitive, cutthroat, dysfunctional environment. And I knew that my entire time there, people were gunning for me and for my position. And so to have to, as you politely put it, do the knowledge transfer, when I left, I was like, but I felt so much better that I did do it the way that I did it. And that I, you know, and I've always said, like, I'm not ever scared of anybody taking my job or anything. I'm like, if somebody ever comes and takes my job, then I'm not supposed to be there anymore. And I know so I've never been worried about that, but it was just really, I was petty for, I wanted to be
we're human.
But I didn't.
I mean, yeah, we're flesh, we're human, right? So
yeah, but
sometimes it's easier said than do.
5 years ago, I might have been, but I rose above it. But it was interesting because one of the lessons that I learned is like, you can train anybody to do anything, but you cannot train them to be you. No. And so literally I resigned in, I think it was the October. By January, the people that were gunning for me had been fired.
See?
Because they had no clue, like they had no clue. And they, you know, so it's just really interesting, but it just taught me. And one of my former bosses, Elroy Smith, I worked for him in Chicago and he got fired. And he was the most gracious fired person I have ever seen in my life. And I just was like, that is such a lesson on how to leave a job.
Yeah.
And it just really, I just will never forget like how he left on such a high note.
And that's important, you know, because I was listening to this podcast and the guest said you should rent your title but own your character. And that speaks volumes. It spoke volumes to me because, you know, your title can be taken away from you voluntarily or involuntarily, but your character is what you have to stand on. At the end of the day, that's what you want people to remember that. And so your integrity, your character, you know, leaving with grace. Even if, you know, you're getting a foot in the back kind of thing.
Escorted out.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it's about you.
I was like, in radio, when you get fired, they escort you out. Like you don't, you have got to leave the building.
Oh yeah. I've walked a few people out in my day.
It's the strangest experience, but yeah, so just that I think that's good stuff because I do think that people get lax. I think people start taking staplers and paper clips and, you know, and like doing doing all of these things. But I think that to me, it's in one way, it's just bad karma because eventually you're going to be the boss and you're going to own all those staplers.
Exactly.
If somebody walks out with yours, you're going to be on fire.
Yeah.
But just to leave with like grace and integrity. And like you said, do as much as you can. To set, you know, the pathway for continued success because, you know, you're going to be now a business owner. Yeah. And so, you know, you kind of would want the same thing. But I think that a lot of people just get so focused on their new passion, which is great, that they forget like what's funding this passion for now. So, So yeah, so you want to protect that. So any final thoughts? They have a lot of people talking about the book. And so I hope that, you know, you definitely support Dr. Tana in that. But any final thought? Oh, can we talk about your third husband? Because you and I never talk about that. And I just,
oh, Lord.
Lord, let's talk about him. So tell me who your third husband is and how you guys met.
So,
I don't know the story.
Oh, okay. So my third husband is legendary hip hop artist Dana Dane. From Dana Dane with Fame, Cinderella Nightmares, Delancey Street, the list goes on in terms of songs and hits that he dropped. One of the first solo artists from Brooklyn to go gold back in the late 80s. And yes, that's my boo now. We just celebrated 7 years married this past Sunday. We've been together for a total of 17 years. And we met on the streets of Brooklyn. I was in Brooklyn. I was actually living in Atlanta at the time, but visiting Brooklyn for the summer, hanging out with family and friends. And he saw me from across the street.
And it was
just
magic.
Said, it was magic. He was like, I need to know who that blonde haired, tall, slim chick is.
I tell you, I saw those Getty images.
We started talking.
I'm not mad.
Conference. Yeah.
I think it's so cool. And
started exchanging contact information and.
Yeah. Wow, that's very cool.
Yeah,
very, very cool.
So yeah, that's my hubby. We support each other. I tell everybody that we're each other's biggest critic and biggest cheerleaders.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. I mean, I love, I love people's reactions when you show up with him because it's like I forget to say,
And our names rhyme too. So it's like Dana and Tana, and they're like, wait a minute, did y'all plan that?
And your Facebook name is Tana Tane, which just was like, why did I not get that before?
Make the connection.
Right. I'm just like, I just never put the two and two together. But anyway, so tell us how everybody can get in contact with you. I know that you're doing some coaching, you're doing some consulting, you have books, you have a lot of things that people can learn from and improve themselves. So how can people get in contact with you?
Sure. So they can follow me on all social media platforms under Dr. Tana M Session. That's DrTanam Session. No S at the end. And they can find me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. And they can also go to my website, tanamsession.com, and get in touch with me directly there. They can learn more about my consulting that I do for businesses around inclusion and diversity and multi-generational workforces, et cetera. Everything from my HR expertise. And then they can also find out more about my coaching. I have a proprietary program called Stop Being the Best Kept Secret. And I help people understand how to own their power, truth, healing, worth, and their destiny in that program. So definitely reach out, learn more about me and everything that I have to offer the universe.
Which is a whole heck of a lot. So definitely follow her. She gives great information on social media. And I just love you. I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited for you. And I can't wait because you do an annual conference based on the best kept secret too. So that should be coming up in 2020, right? 2020,
yeah. And I've had people ask me, I did it in Atlanta and New York last year. Got booked too much this year to do it. But next year I'm looking to do it in St. Louis and Detroit. And it will be in spring and summer. So just have to decide which. Yeah.
Let me know about St. Louis because I'm a homegirl.
Oh, okay. I will.
Definitely. All right, you guys, thank you so much. Make sure that you connect with Dr. Tana Session and make sure that you get all of that good information from her. Dr. Tana, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend it with us and enlighten us. And I will see you guys next time. We'll have some more conversation around things that really will change our lives. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night. Bye, Dr. Tana.
Bye.